take a look at the Parsha. Parshas Eikev, as I mentioned throughout the week, there's no other Parsha in the Torah that has as much praise for Eretz Yisrael as Parshas Eikev. It's the Parsha that has the Shivas Haminim, Eretz Chitus Ora. It's the Parsha that has the mitzvah of benching that we spoke about. Even benching is connected to Eretz Yisrael. It's the Parsha, later in the Parsha, we have the second Parsha of Kriya Shema. Last week's Parsha, V'eschanan Hashma Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It doesn't say Baruch Shein K'vay Machus L'Olam Ba'ad in the Torah. That was added by Chazal. It's a phrase that Yaakov Avinu said, a separate subject. Maybe one day we'll talk about how Kriya Shema was put together. But it doesn't say Baruch Shein K'vay Machus L'Olam Ba'ad in the Sefer Torah. So last week, but we do say, as we mentioned earlier in the Shir, Baruch Shein K'vay Machus L'Olam Ba'ad is how you answer a bracha in the Beis HaMikdash. So last week's Parsha of Eschanan, we had the Parsha of Shema. This week's Parsha Eikev, we have the Parsha of Oyim Shemoah and Bahayim Shemoah. We have that famous Rashi Ramban that we spoke about so many times. Hashem nosin lachem. Sometimes Mr. Alavav al Nafshem Kshatem or Samos Layethem Oilu to Prophet Benechem Chatzashom if you're not showing Torah mitzvahs, you go into exile. When you're in exile, put on your tefillin and keep the mezuzah on your door. Why is the Rebbeinu Shalom reminding me to put the tefillin on my hand, mezuzah on my door if I'm in Chutz La'aretz? Of course I have to wear tefillin and put up a mezuzah in Chutz La'aretz. It's not shmita, it's not truma, it's not ma'isa, it's not a mitzvah that has anything to do with something that grows from the ground. Chayvus karka grows from the ground. I take off truma ma'isa because it grew from the holy ground of Eretz Yisrael. I don't take off truma ma'isa because it grew in Lakewood, New Jersey. It doesn't work. I don't have to take off Trumas and Mises in Lakewood, Muncie, Williamsburg anyway. It doesn't work because it's just not. It's not a place of Trumas and Mises. So I don't take off Trumas and Mises there. But tefillin and mezuzah is on my body. Nobody would have a shaila and say, do I have to keep Taras HaMishpach in Chutz La'aretz? Of course I have to keep Taras HaMishpach in Chutz La'aretz. I'm only doing it with Eretz Yisrael. But it's not pashut. And that's what the Rashi and the Ramban tell us, that the Rebbeinu Shalom said, Kiyum mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz, certainly the positive mitzvahs, are there for Hatzivi L'cha Tziyonim. When Mashiach comes, these mitzvahs should not be new to you. You have to remember the mitzvahs. And that we talked about the Ikka Kiyum mitzvahs, the Ramban says, is dafka in God's palace in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, it's so you don't forget the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. I've weighed back and forth. I want to learn this piece of Rav Kook, and I've weighed back and forth whether I should make any comment whatsoever. People have, as I mentioned, one person in particular called me, wrote me. Other people have called me. There was an article in the Mishpacha magazine, and I asked people, whenever someone says, did you see the article in Mishpacha? My answer to them is, no, I don't let it in my house. And why do you let it in your house? It has Torah articles. It's very nice. And it has all kinds of advertisements that have nothing to do with Torah and are antithetical to Torah. And even the Torah articles are sometimes antithetical to Torah. So there was an article in a recent Mishpacha about a Rosh Hashiva in America being asked about whether Jews, it's time now to go to Eretz Yisrael. So, young married couples have come to him and asked him whether now is the time. There's so much anti-Semitism and the corona and so many things appear to be happening. They're happening so quickly. Maybe it's a time now to go to Eretz Yisrael. It's very dangerous in America. And his answer was less than parav. It certainly wasn't an encouragement. Yeah, everybody should go, which it's time for the Rosh Yeshivas to start talking about. Yes, it's time to go. But look, as I mentioned so many times, Eretz Yisrael has been a problem for Gedolim since we've tried to get into Eretz Yisrael the first time around. The Chet HaMeraglim were by 10 of 12 people that Moshe handpicked. Moshe handpicked 12 people and said, these are the right people to check out Eretz Yisrael. And to Moshe Rabbeinu's own surprise, 10 of them came back and said, we're not going. Yoshua and Kalev said, we are going. So Moshe Rabbeinu picked out Gedolim. He didn't pick out common people, and 10 of the people just failed the mission and kept the Jewish people in the Midbar for 40 years. and everybody over 20 died in the Midbar because of these 10 people that spoke Lashon Hara in Eretz Yisrael. We mentioned yesterday Tu B'Av. How did they die? Mabtzich Bagrot. Every Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av, anyone over 20 at the Chet HaMeraglim dug their own kever and went to sleep the night of Tisha B'Av in their kever. Some of them woke up the next morning and some of them didn't. The ones that woke up next year, after Tisha B'Av, they dug their graves again, went back in. And every year they did this until everyone who was over 20 or above at the Chet HaMeraglim self-buried themselves. And there's a lesson there. Chet HaMeraglim, you don't just die, you self-bury yourself. Take that for whatever it means. So we would think that the time has already come. It's post Tisha B'Av. We're in these parshas, Es Hanan, Eikev, we're in these parshas. God is talking to us. We sterilize all this. God's not talking to me. The Torah is talking to me. The Pasuk says, and when you start talking this way, the Pasuk here, there are a lot of Psukim. This Pasuk says this, and this Pasuk says this. The Torah says here, the Torah says this here, and the Torah says this here. The Gemara says, yeah, the Gemara says this here, and the Gemara says this here, and Tosfos says it's a contradiction, and how do you answer it? If we stop, and I've said this so many times, I've said it in public, can we maybe, while we're learning, once or twice, instead of saying the Pasuk says, instead of saying the Torah says, can we have the courage to say, and the Ribono Shel Olam told us? The Torah says put on tzitzis. The Ribono Shel Olam said put on tzitzis. The Ribono Shel Olam told us to put on tefillin. The Torah says you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. The Ribono Shel Olam says you can't do this on Shabbos. I saw a beautiful piece. There's a sefer written, it's Rav Suriki gives a 5-minute shmooze in his yeshiva. I don't remember if it's before Mincha or after Mincha. Just picks a topic out of the end, he talks about it. And they took these little 5-7-minute drushes, they made it into a sefer. And I'm reading through the sefer, and I came to a beautiful idea. He said, a Yidel is standing on Shabbos next to his urn, and he wants to make himself a coffee. So he's standing there. Do I put the coffee in first, and then the hot water? Should I put the hot water in first, then the coffee? Is it a kli rishon? Is it a kli sheni? Maybe I should take the water from the urn into the cup, then pour the cup into another cup, so it's a kli shlishi, and then put the coffee in. Which way should I do it? What exactly is going on with this Yidel Shabbos morning? He wants to simply make himself a coffee. You know what he's doing? He's working with the Ribono Shel Olam. The Ribono Shel Olam is there with him. And the Ribono Shel Olam said, don't cook on Shabbos. And this Yidel is standing there trying to figure out how to make coffee for himself, but he's making coffee according to the Ribono Shel Olam's will. The Ribono Shel Olam is making coffee with the Yidel at the urn. The Ribono Shel Olam, we're talking about Ribono Shel Olam. We say the Shulchan Aruch says, and the Beis Yosef says. We're so used to talking about people and human beings and poskim and gedolim that we stopped talking about God. We lost God in the thicket of Sfarim, in the thicket of gedolim, in the thicket of all these kinds of things. We stopped saying God. Say God a couple of times a day. Now, when we say Shemona Esrei, we say Baruch Hashem Elokeinu, fine. But when we're learning, insert God into your learning, so you know your learning is connected to God. So when we're talking about Eretz Yisrael, it's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, not a mitzvah to Eretz Yisrael. It's a deraisa, it's manazeh. We have all this stuff, and we start with the fingers. Yes, and there's a taste of it. Can we read some psukim? Psukim. Can we read what God said? In this week's parsha, God said a lot of things about Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Hashem Elokecha Doirish Isa, Talmud Ein Hashem Elokecha, Bar Mireishis Hashana Vadat Rishana. Amazing, amazing pasuk. Let's see the pasuk. I need to see the pasuk inside again. Shishi. Ki oretz asher ato v'sham l'rishto lo yicheretz Mitzrayim hi asher yitzasa misham asher tiz v'sarach v'shkasa v'ragel chakagana yorek. It's better than Mitzrayim, even though the Mitzrayim have the Nile. It is better, much better. This is a land that's going to need rain, and I'll give you the rain. Eretz, it's a land. Who's talking? Not the Pasuk, not the Torah. God is talking to every Jew. Open your ears, God's talking to you now. And maybe we should all stand up when we read. And that's why a lot of people stand up for Kriyas HaTorah. God's talking. Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha Doresh Isa. This is the land that God seeks and searches. Tamid Eini Hashem Elokecha Ba. God's eyes, God's watchful eye. God's watchful eye is on this land, Meireshus Hashana, from the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah, and Achar Shana, until the end of the year. God's watchful eye is here. I'm sorry to notify everybody, but that's what the Pasuk says. It doesn't say anything about Chutz La'aretz, and as we learned in Masech the Nazir, a Nazir that kept his Nazirus and Chutz La'aretz, when he gets to Eretz Yisrael, he has to start again. Because Chazal will go, Tuma al Eretz Am. Outside Eretz Yisrael is Tomei. And a Nazir can't do his Nazirus in a place that's Tomei. A Nazir can't keep his Nazirus in a cemetery. We all know that. A Nazir can't go into a cemetery. If he goes into a cemetery, B'mezid, he gets Malchus, and he loses his Nazirus, and he has to bring Karbonis, and he has to start again, because he's in a cemetery. He's with dead people, and he can't come into contact with dead people. The Nazir, we learned in a Mishnah. And who told us the Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And where did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi get these halachas from? All the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu. And where did Moshe Rabbeinu get these halachas from? From the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu, in this context, you shall observe what the Chachamim say. So God told Moshe Rabbeinu, observe what the Chachamim say. The Chachamim said that Chutz La'aretz is Tamei. It's Tamei. You can't be a Nazir in Chutz La'aretz. You're in a cemetery. You're in a dead man's place. So this Rosh Yeshiva was asked. He had the Rebbeinu Shalom sends even Rosh Yeshivas wonderful opportunities. And he sends opportunities to Rosh Yeshiva. He says, people are calling me, it's time to leave Chutz La'aretz. And instead of saying, yeah, leave, go. I didn't read the article. I didn't read the article because it was sent to me by several people, and I don't have the strength anymore to read the stuff. It gives me so much agnos nefesh, especially when it's quote unquote from a Rosh Yeshiva. I can't, because I don't know what Torah. It makes me feel. I don't know how to. It's fine. I don't know how to say how I feel, because I know I'm learning. I know I'm teaching, but I'm not sure if I'm learning and teaching the same Torah that they're learning and teaching. It's a complete. We're not learning the same Torah. If I read this week's parsha and they read this week's parsha, how can you read this week's parsha and live in America and know what's going on in the world and not say, yes, start making your arrangements to leave? Well, I can't read these articles. But according to what these people told me, there's a quote in there that, yes, it's laudatory to go to Eretz Yisrael. What does it mean it's laudatory to go to Eretz Yisrael? Is it laudatory to put on your tzitzis? Is it laudatory to keep Taharas HaMishpacha? A young couple comes to you and says, Rosh Hashiva, should we keep Taharas HaMishpacha? Yeah, it's very laudatory. Are we learning the same time? Okay. He's saying Shita Aleph, Shita Bey, Shita Gimel. It's 2,000 years into the Golus already with the Shitas. It's 2,000 years later. So there's the Shita that it was too dangerous to move to Eretz Yisrael, which apparently he talked about in the article. He had mentioned that Eretz Yisrael is also surrounded by enemies. I didn't read the article. I'm just telling you what people told me. I don't know how you can say that about Eretz Yisrael. The Chet HaMeraglim, we talked about it in Parshas Shalach. The Chet HaMeraglim, the Ramban says, is the word Ephes. But Eretz Yisrael is a great place. Look at the fruits, look at this, look at that. But we'd like to tell you about a problem. The Ramban says the word Ephes is the Chet HaMeraglim. We're living Chet HaMeraglim. We have Gedolei Ador that is still living Chet HaMeraglim. Eretz Yisrael is a great place to go. It's very laudatory. But there are enemies that live around Eretz Yisrael too. But Meragel, Chet HaMeraglim. I'm very sorry. I don't know what to say. That's the Torah I learned. And so it's what it says, for heaven's sake. It's what it says. It's 2,000 years later, and people are still talking about, is it safe? Is it not safe? You have a panosa? Do you not have a panosa? You're hit with the corona. You're hit with the riots. You're hit with anti-Semitism. It's laudatory to God. So this is the parasha. We have so much in this parasha about praise for Eretz Yisrael. And one of the things we have in this week's parasha is the Shiras Hamina. Pasuk says, sent out the handout, Eretz chita us'oira v'gefen ut'eina v'rimain eretz e'shemen udavash. It's a land, wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, a land flowing of oil, which means dates, means olives, udavash, and dates. Notice in the pasuk that the word eretz is said twice, for no reason, apparently, until we learn the Gemara. The pasuk could have said, Eretz chitus ora v'gefen ut'eina v'rimon zeishem udavash. It's a land of wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and date honey. Instead, the pasuk says eretz and 5 things, and then says eretz again and 2 more things. Eretz of wheat, barley, grape, fig, pomegranate, eretz of the olive, and date honey. So we have 5 connected to eretz, and we have 2 connected to eretz. So the Gemara in Brachas brings down the following event from which we learn out a very important halacha about making brachas. Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna have a yasei b'sudasayu. Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna were sitting together and eating a suda. Aisa lekamayu tamri v'rimayni. And they brought in front of these 2 gedolim, Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna, they brought before them tamarim, dates, v'rimayni, and pomegranates. Which, they're both a bari pri ha'etz. Which one gets the bari pri ha'etz? You're not going to make 2 bari pri ha'etz. You're going to make 1. Which one should you make the bari pri ha'etz? So if I'm doing it without learning the Gemara, and there's a shita like that we'll see, I look at the pasuk. I say eretz chita u'sa'ira. First of all, chita sa'ira are mezainas. They come before everything. Fine. Now I'm dealing with fruits. What's the first fruit? Geffen, a grape. So if I have grapes in front of me and other fruits of Eretz Yisrael in front of me, I make the ha'etz on the grape. That's what I would say. Ute'ena, if I have grapes and a fig, I'm going to make the bari pri ha'etz on the grape and not the fig. Te'ena v'rimon. What happens if I have a fig and a pomegranate in front of me? I'm going to make the bari pri ha'etz on the fig, the te'ena, because it's before in the pasuk. What happens if I have a pomegranate and an olive? What bracha do I make? I make a bari pri ha'etz. So I make the bari pri ha'etz on the pomegranate or on the olive. So I'm looking at the pasuk. I say, well, pomegranate comes before olive. Eretz chitus ora gefen te'ena rimon eretz e'shemen udavash. So if I have a pomegranate and an olive, I'm going to make the bari pri ha'etz on the pomegranate. It's first in the pasuk. So this is the story that happens in the Gemara. Rav Chisda and Rav Hamnuna are sitting together, and the servant brought out for them a date and a rimon. Instead of an olive and a rimon, he brings out a date and a rimon. The rimon is still before the date. Davash, the last word in the pasuk, means dates. Rimon comes before dates. So where do you make the bari pri ha'etz? On the rimon. Shakal Rav Hamnuna Baruch Atamni Bereshi. So Rav Hamnuna took the date and made the bracha. Now, if you're just looking at numbers, the date is the seventh thing in the pasuk. The date is the seventh thing in the pasuk. The pomegranate is the fifth thing in the pasuk. So what would you make the Borei Pri Eitz on? The pomegranate. It's more chashuv. It came first. He didn't do that. He made the bracha on the seventh thing, which is the date. Amalei Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda said to Rav Hamnuna, Loi sevira leimar kol hamukdam b'pasuk zeh mukdam lebracha. Don't you hold that because the Rabbeinu Shalom put this in a certain order, that the ones that come before others are more chashuv than the others? And in the pasuk, Rimon is number 5, Tamar is number 7. You should have made a Borei Pri Eitz on the Rimon. Why did you make a Borei Pri Eitz on the Tamar? Amaloi. So Rav Hamnuna said, no, that's not how I hold. Zeh sheni la'oretz, v'zeh chamishi la'oretz. The word eretz appears twice in the pasuk. Eretz and 5 things after that. Eretz and 2 things after that. So we're going to split the pasuk in 2. Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom write eretz twice? Because he's creating 2 sets of meaning. Eretz 5 in Eretz 1, Eretz and 2 in Eretz 2. Eretz 1 has chita se'oira gefen te'ena rimon. Eretz 2 has olives and dates. That's why Rebbeinu Shalom wrote the pasuk, to teach us this halacha. Kol hamukdam b'pasuk zeh mukdam lebracha. Amalai zeh sheni laretz v'zeh chamishi laretz. So Rav Hamnuna answered him, the closer you are to the word eretz, the quicker you are to get a bracha. So the Rimon is number 5 to the word eretz. Eretz chitus ora gefen te'ena Rimon. The Rimon is the 5th thing mentioned after the word eretz. And then you have eretz again. And it says olives and dates. The date is the 2nd thing to the word eretz. The closer you are to eretz, Rav Hamnuna says, the closer you are to have the bracha set on you. So while it is true that Rimon is 5 and Tamar is 7, that's if you just read it straight. But the Rebbeinu Shalom cut it in half. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, eretz 5, eretz 2. And the Tamar is number 2 to eretz 2. The Rimon is number 5 to eretz 1. And therefore, since the Tamar, the date, is closer to the word eretz, it gets the bracha, not the Rimon, who's more distant from the eretz. So even if you're in the first part of eretz, but you're distant from that word, you don't get the bracha. If you're in the second eretz, because you're close to the word, you get the bracha. That's the story. Rav Kook uses this piece of Gemara. We don't have time to read the whole piece of Rav Kook. Rav Kook explains this Gemara about how important Chavivus Eretz Yisrael is, loving Eretz Yisrael, cherishing Eretz Yisrael, becoming close to Eretz Yisrael, becoming attached to Eretz Yisrael. The Rabbeinu Shalom wrote the word Eretz in this pasuk twice. Why? Why didn't he just write Eretz and 7 things after that? He could have broken it in, 4 and 3. He could have broken it into different ways. But he broke it into 5 and 2 for his Chachma Elyonim. But he broke it into 2 segments. And because he broke it into 2 segments, we have this halacha, that the closer you are to the word Eretz, the closer you are to the bracha. The closer you are to Eretz Yisrael, the more you cherish Eretz Yisrael, the more devoted and loyal you are to Eretz Yisrael, the closer you are to bracha. And therefore the Tamar will come before the Rimon. Although when we look at the pasuk, we say, hey, Rimon is 5 and Tamar is 7. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's not first come, first serve. It's who's closer to the word Eretz. And Tomer may be 7 the way you look at it. But the Rebbeinu Shalom put a separate word, Eretz, to tell you that the closest, even an inanimate object, a fruit, because the date is closer to the word Eretz, the date is Zoicha to get to the bracha, even though the word Rimon appears before it. But Rimon is number 5 to the first Eretz. Even a fruit gets a bracha before another fruit, because it's just closer to the word. Kal v'chomer, a human being who gets closer to Eretz Yisrael, who cherishes Eretz Yisrael, who's makshav Eretz Yisrael, who understands that the place of Kiyum Mitzvahs, Ikka Kiyum Mitzvahs, and Ikka Liman HaTorah is in Eretz Yisrael. And this is going to be really, this is a Mashiach job. For years I thought, and I hope I'm wrong, but for years I thought that this is the job of Klal Yisrael. Yidden that make Aliyah and they come from all parts of the world. This is the Makabas in Yisrael. It's a miracle. The South Africans will help bring more South Africans, which they do. The British will bring more British, which they do. The Americans will bring more Americans, which they do. And the Canadians will bring more Americans, with more Canadians, which they do. Everybody's bringing more and more and more because we leave an impression on what we leave behind. And they say, if he can do it, I can do it also. But there's a certain group of people that follow Gedolim, quote unquote. And I have this shita about it's laudatory to go to Eretz Yisrael. There's something laudatory about it. And America is dangerous, and Israel also has enemies around it, FS. And we can't unwind ourselves from the Rabbah. We just can't. So Rebbeinu Shalom have Rachmanas on us. The same way we learned in the Ramchal a few minutes ago, that there's nothing the human being can do in his lifetime to lift up the guf to where it's supposed to be because of the gezerah of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. There's nothing we can do. Everybody has to die, and the body has to decompose from the infection. There's nothing we can do. But you set up a system in the perfectly imperfect world where you can perfect the imperfectly imperfect world even through me. So we're doing our best here. We're really doing our best. So many of us have made Aliyah. So many of us are trying to convince other Yidden to make Aliyah. But Rebbeinu Shalom have Rachmanas on us. Skatemish. They're Pashut Yidden, Einayim Lahem V'lo Yiru, Oznayim Lahem V'lo Yishmo. And as I mentioned, the scariest thing in the world is I spoke to a Frum Yid, a good friend of mine in Baltimore. And we were having a talk, and I said, what are you waiting for? Your children live in Eretz Yisrael. What are you waiting for? Why are you coming here? And he said to me, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to say to you what Jews think, but they're not willing to admit. I'm waiting for a pogrom. When the big pogrom hits America and we realize that we just have to get out because we're going to die here, that's probably when we'll be ready to leave. So I said to him, it's very honest of you to say that, but how do you know the planes will be flying post this pogrom that you're thinking about? We already see from different points in history that planes don't fly. You just don't say, I'm waiting for the pogrom and then I'll go. You don't know if you're going to go. You don't know if you can go. Why don't you get out before the pogrom? And he didn't answer me. Rebbeinu Shalom already have a Bishul Rachmanas. We came with a Mesivus Nefesh. We're trying to get other people to come. We talk to them, but they're Pashut. We're fighting Gedolei Hadar. There are Rosh Hashivas and Gedolim that are implanted there, and they can't get their head wrapped around the idea that you can take a key and lock the yeshiva door and tell everybody to go to Eretz Yisrael. They can't get their heads wrapped around that. They need Mashiach to come and take the key and lock the door. They can't lock the door. They need Mashiach to come lock the door. Baruch Shalom already have Rachmanas on us. We did everything we can. We're doing everything we can. Hotshina Bissel Rachmanas Rebbeinu Shalom. Open their hearts, open their minds. Let them hear this Shabbos from the Baal Koirei, Parshas Eikev. Let them not hear Torah. Let them not hear a pasuk. Let them hear you speaking Rebbeinu Shalom. Let them hear your voice in their minds and their hearts. They should understand what the system needs, what the system operates, open them up and save them and have them come, be as Mashiach, be in Beis Hamikdash, Korban Tamid, B'mher V'yameinu Amen.
Amen.
All Yidden need refuah shel refuahs. All Yidden need Yeshua shel Yeshuas. All Yidden need Nechama shel Nechamas. All Yidden need brachas shel brachas. All Yidden that need their hearts, their minds, their understanding open, so they can understand Eretz Asher Hashem Lekecha Dorish Esah Tamid Ein Hashem Lekecha Ba Mereishis Hashana but Achar Shana. They should hear it directly from you, Rabbi Shalom, in this week's parsha. They should be zeicher to all the brachas of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Shalom, you're the only one that can send these things. You're the Echad Yochad Yuchad. No one else can do it. You can only do it when you want to do it, how you want to do it, and please do it as quickly as possible. Please, B'mheir Yameinu Hayoim, Hayoim Yokarlis Shmo. Everybody take care of yourselves. Go to places only if you should. If you don't have to, don't. Take care of yourselves. Health conditions that are taken into consideration. Your age taken into consideration. The whole ra'ot are taken into consideration. You need to understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom loves healthy Jews that continue to learn, review meters, finish Talmud. We'll make a siyum at Shashem next week. We're going to start Shkolim with Mashiach Tzidkenu. He's going to give a big shir about Masech Shkolim. He's going to collect Shkolim. Everybody get Shkolim ready. We're not talking about 1 shekel. We're talking about the shekel HaKodesh. Everybody get that. We're gonna have coins minted, shekel HaKodesh, and Hashem will be able to donate a matzis a shekel, or some say a full shekel, to the new Beis Hamikdash. Everybody take care of yourself. Be careful according to the rules and the regulations. That's our hishtadlus, and everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful day and a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos Kodesh. Sei gesund.